Corruption failed Russia again. Hi, folks. I'm starting this YouTube channel with a post about Russia's war on Ukraine. The war presents the West with major opportunities. Grasping them forces us to grapple with Russia's point of view. Like most Westerners, I abhor the loss of life and know we must stand against aggression. Nothing I say justifies Russian actions in Ukraine. Nothing can. Still, this is not an anti-Russian video. Russia may not even exist in another 100 years. How do we know this? Russia collapsed twice in the last 100 years. The 1917 Russian Revolution and the Soviet Union's 1992 disintegration. No one conquered them. They collapsed from within. Today's Russia looks a lot like Russia before the revolution. Putin holds absolute power. He surrounds himself with Orthodox Christian priests. He declares himself protector of the faith and Russian culture. He sends his forces to a humiliating collapse, fighting a smaller power. The collapse shows his corruption and incompetence. The late Russian Empire failed at every level. The empire failed to plan. The Tsar expected easy victories. The empire didn't adopt modern tactics. Leaders did not allow small units to act on their own. Nobles feared the lower ranks and kept them on a tight leash. The empire didn't improve training. Commanders kept throwing ill-trained conscripts into battle. The empire couldn't keep up with Western technology. Russian weapons remained old and obsolete. The empire could not support warfare's increasing scale. Russian industry couldn't produce enough stuff. The transportation system couldn't move it. Corruption bled the empire dry. Putin's Russia failed at every level. Putin failed to plan. He expected an easy victory. Russia didn't adopt modern tactics. Leaders still don't allow small units to act on their own. Ukraine's recent retraining in the Western style is a major advantage. They're more flexible and they grasp opportunities better. Russia did not train her soldiers. She threw untrained conscripts into battle. Russia still can't keep up with Western technology. Her troops fight modern missiles in 50-year-old Soviet tanks. Russia cannot support her war effort. Her economy is too small to mass-produce new tanks or planes. Corruption bleeds the Russian Federation dry. Russian society is failing. The population is declining and the average age is increasing. Russian men rank top 10 in the world for suicide and drug overdose deaths. The Russian economy is stagnating like it did under Brezhnev. Organized crime infests society at every level and goes all the way to the top. Putin, Mr. 50%, is the top crime boss. Insiders describe society as disorganized and passive. Short-term stability depends on the food supply. Russia produces enough food if she can move it around. Most Russian planes and trains rely on Western spare parts. Without them, they come to a halt. We already see food rationing and panic buying. Longer-term stability depends on new markets for Russian products. The problem is Russia remains a one-trick pony, heavily reliant on energy exports. Without Western demand, China and the remaining buyers are going to drive a hard bargain. Long-term, things look grim. Current trends could drop Russia's population below 100 million by 2070. Russia's crisis speaks to what it is to be Russian. Traditional Russians believed in a strong leader, a leader unlimited by law, an autocrat, a dictator, someone who drives them towards empire, someone who protects Mother Russia. It's not working. Russians consider Putin a strong leader. History shows Tsar Nicholas II was a weak one. He didn't even want to be Tsar. A strong and a weak leader, separated by almost 120 years. Both embarrassed Russia before the world. Both oversaw jaw-dropping corruption. In 1903, half the Navy budget disappeared without a single ship built. Russia's Navy chief decked out his mistress in diamonds. Putin's ill-supplied military shows funds meant for the troops paid for yachts in Cyprus and anonymous property in London. Corruption makes Russia weak. Putin speaks of Russian greatness. What makes a people great? Working together towards a common dream makes a people great. Early Soviet citizens believed in communism. European monarchies believed in Christianity. Enlightenment thinkers believed in liberalism. When people believe in a better future and know today's sacrifice is rewarded, we can accomplish unbelievable feats. When the corrupt take all the goodies, belief collapses. Societies rot from within. To understand why, consider a cooperation game. You and 3 strangers get $20 to start each round. You're free to keep your $20, or you can put it in the pot. You get back 50 cents for each dollar in the pot. Risking your $20 only guarantees you 10. But if everyone risks 20, you each end up with 40. Wherever investigators ran the public goods game, people started cheating. But most of the deadbeats stopped when the others turned on them. Players from corrupt cultures also attacked others for giving too much. Why? Why not? Why sacrifice if the rewards always go to someone else? Cooperation cannot survive injustice. Dreams die. Cooperation research tells a story. Greece ranked at the bottom in 2008. Ugly. Not surprising when you remember Greece suffers from rampant tax dodging and corruption. The Greek government ran out of money a year later. Creditors demanded draconian cuts and really hurt the Greek people. By 2012, Greeks held an estimated 20 billion euros in Swiss banks, 99% of it untaxed. The estimate rose to 80 billion by 2015. Greece also briefly held the dubious honor of most corrupt EU economy. Ukraine told a very different story. Cooperation scores landed about halfway between Russia or Belarus on the low end and Germany or Switzerland on the high end. Is it any surprise they push for closer ties with Europe? Fair is not fair everywhere, but everywhere fair is fair. We know it when we see it. We oppose injustice. We opt out. We undermine. We attack. We destroy. Corruption destroyed Imperial Russia. The Romanovs spent decades stamping out liberal influences. No to a written constitution. No to following written laws. No to any limits on the Tsar's power. Unlimited power allowed unlimited corruption. Russian authorities did not respect the law. Laws only existed to control the population. The state did not enforce contracts. Bribery was common. Popular Russian proverbs on the law give the flavor. Law is a pole of a cart. You can handle it as you like. Wherever there is a law court, there is also untruth. Into a court wearing a coat, out of the court without a shred of clothing on. Russia's Industrial Revolution started late and went slow. Russia was poor. Too poor for private enterprise to lead the way. Weak laws and a corrupt bureaucracy didn't attract much foreign investment. The czars drove the process to keep their military competitive. They bound serfs to factories as a captive labor force. Cheap labor left owners little reason to innovate. Russia stagnated while European industry rocketed ahead. Russia's 1913 GDP was similar to Portugal. The West eclipsed Russia in the late 19th and early 20th century. They couldn't keep up with modern warfare. Russia never caught up. The West ran Russia ragged. Russia could not sustain a modern army in the 1853-56 Crimean War. Just one railway line connected Moscow and St. Petersburg. Complex chains of command broke down. Corrupt officials stole supplies. Drunken Russian soldiers with outdated muskets, prone to misfire, faced British soldiers with rifled guns. Opposing British forces enjoyed adequate supplies and even some luxuries. The British brought in supplies by steamship and built a 15-mile railway from scratch in less than 3 months. Russia was hopelessly outclassed. Graft, corruption, and incompetence plagued the Russian Navy. The 1904 Russo-Japanese War exposed a fleet better at parades than combat. Untrained conscript sailors failed basic tasks. The Baltic Fleet flagship ran aground. Panicked sailors attacked British fishing vessels in the North Sea, mistaking them for Japanese torpedo boats. That bonehead move almost started a war with the strongest naval power on Earth. Incompetent, high-born officers, they blew the actual war with Japan. Russia's refusal to adapt to the modern world doomed the empire. Losing wars exposed the nobility's greed and incompetence. World War I defeats sealed the empire's fate. Corruption and inefficiency destroyed the Soviet Union. Rampant but quiet bribery permeated late Soviet life. Money for a good doctor, money for placement in the right school, or even marks on a test, money for a better posting for state-mandated work. The fact no one could invest ill-gotten gains in property, no private property, limited the scale, but not the scope. The lack of private property also comes with a major downside. No reason to work hard. People did just enough and resented those who tried to do more. Russians said, "They pretend to pay us, we pretend to work." Like the cooperation game we talked about earlier. The Russian Federation never stood a chance. Insiders robbed Russia blind. Billions left, bound for US and Swiss bank accounts. Private property rights and access to Western banks turned the USSR's quiet corruption into grand larceny. Organized crime ran roughshod over ordinary Russians. Mr. Putin rose to power, promising to restore order and make Russia great again. He silenced or imprisoned his enemies, replaced independent oligarchs with kowtowing men who act like oligarchs. Russians accept corruption. The Russian people elevated Putin to power. He rules like a traditional Russian autocrat. To my friends, everything. To my enemies, the law. Remember, Russians see the law as arbitrary and unfair. To his friends, he was indeed everything. Like a traditional Russian ruler, he allowed his friends to loot the country. Like many Russian rulers before him, he appointed unqualified people to run the military and allowed his friends to plunder it. Like many rulers, he failed Mother Russia, left her weak and exposed to her enemies. Russia now has three choices. Option 1, continue business as usual. The Russian economy tanks. Russia doesn't have the people it needs. Over 5 million young, well-educated people fled Russia during Putin's reign. Over 200,000 more since Putin's invasion and crackdown. They're not coming back until things get better. Losing your best and brightest really makes this whole recovery thing hard. Russia becomes much more dependent on China. They need China to buy their energy exports and also to replace Western technology. China is the only country with a comparable technology base. Replacements are going to take time and cost a whole lot of money. Russia becomes a nuclear-armed Chinese vassal supplying raw materials. She continues on her path to oblivion. Option 2, renounce official corruption. Russia's survival is at stake. Something has to give. A corrupt Russia cannot prosper. Russian culture accepts good corruption and mistrusts the law. Changing those beliefs is a huge challenge. It's also the only way ordinary Russians buy into their nation and rebuild. Today's unjust regime holds Russia back. If people stop accepting corruption, Russia can become a force to be reckoned with. Russian exiles return and build their nation. The economy diversifies. More people choose to have children. Possibilities are huge. And that brings us to option number 3, thermonuclear murder suicide. Russia has the means, motive, and opportunity. The over 1,000 strategic warheads provide the means. The apocalyptic religious sect around Putin provides the motive. The head of the Russian Orthodox Church is on record predicting doomsday is near. Putin's power provides the opportunity. It is absolute. Very few people would dare ignore his order. Putin may not care if Russia dies, as long as he takes us with him. He already sent his family to safety in a secret underground city. Another option, escalating to nuclear weapons in Ukraine or elsewhere, turns into option 3 if NATO does not fold. Since NATO can't afford to back down to nuclear blackmail, there isn't much difference. That's where we are. How'd we get here? Was Russia always doomed to this fate? Or did the West help set the stage? Britain and France's determination to punish and demean Germany at Versailles after World War I helped set the stage for Hitler. Did the West's post-Cold War actions play a similar role? Losing the Cold War humiliated Russia. Her empire vanished. The IMF's brutal, ill-considered economic shock therapy piled on the pain. Life expectancy fell. Birth rates collapsed. Crime spread unchecked. Inequality exploded. Chaos reigned. The Russians call this time bespredel, no limits. Russian integration with the West also addicted major cities like London to torrents of dirty money. The US treated Russia like a beaten foe, not a new security partner. In 1992, Paul Wolfowitz addressed the US Congress. The main strategic interest of the United States is to prevent the creation of a large and independent strategic entity in the territory of the former Soviet Union capable of pursuing a policy independent of the United States. No great power, no proud people can accept such disrespect. Pride goeth before the fall. U.S. actions after the Cold War set the stage. The West hasn't screwed up this badly since Versailles. Russia's ultranationalist reaction was already developing. Meet fascist polymath Alexander Dugin. He devoted his life to restoring Russian greatness. He blames the West for the USSR's 1992 collapse, and he wants payback. He's no mere thinker. He maintains ties with far-right groups across Europe. Helped start some of them. Russian generals study his 1997 book, Foundations of Geopolitics, at the Russian Staff Academy. Foundations also remains popular with other influential Russians. His flavor of fascism is called Neo-Eurasianism. He lives for a world where Russia's influence stretches from Ireland to Vladivostok. Dugin doesn't want Russia to colonize Europe. He wants Russia to divide and dominate it. In his words, make Europe European. Throw out Britain and the US. Break up NATO. Populate Europe with ethnic states that don't play nice with each other. Create a fourth way society focused on peoples, not global markets. Dugin bases his new world on old ideas: orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. The all-powerful leader defending Eastern Orthodoxy and Russian culture. He seeks a return to the czars of old, not in form, but in substance. He wants to replace modern values with ancient heroic ones. Dugin is a good postmodernist who rejects reason and logic. It is the idea that thoughts are magic, that thoughts can change reality. It is the suggestion that thoughts replace reality as fact. He suggests we liberate ourselves from chemistry and physics. Dugin makes insanity sound almost reasonable. He embraces relativism when it suits him. Dugin justifies racism, genocide, misogyny, and more inside countries. His argument uses the postmodernist idea that no one people's ways are better than any other. Each people should decide what's best for them. Sounds pretty good so far, but there's a catch. How do you criticize human rights abuses when whatever a country does is right for its people? He ditches relativism when it doesn't suit him. Dugin claims that only Russia is virile enough to lead Eurasia. He rejects postmodernism for the individual. The nation is everything, the individual is nothing. And as for the Russians themselves, Russians should realize they are Orthodox first, ethnic Russians second, and only in the third place, individuals. For Dugin's world to live, America and the West must die. Quote, "It is especially important for Russian special services and their allies to introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the U.S. It would also make sense to simultaneously support isolationist policies in American politics." He also believed Afro-American racism could be particularly useful. He was right. Now what? What can Ukraine and the West do after defeating Russia's forces? Punishing Putin's war crimes feels good, but could lead to disaster. Putin is no general, but he is a master propagandist. World War II introduced the world to blitzkrieg, lightning war, a new way to fight wars. New technology, radio, tanks, and attack aircraft changed warfare. Russia's hybrid war is a similar turning point. Communications advances allow global access. Social media allows direct access to Western homes. Psychology allows more efficient propaganda. Why fight the West when you can manipulate public opinion to get them to do what you want? Putin shattered Western politics. Financial support for Western fascists and a well-coordinated disinformation campaign on social media put our future in jeopardy. The US stands on the brink of a fascist takeover. Russian thinkers wanted Brexit before Brexit was a thing. France has Le Pen. Even Germany hosts an active neo-fascist party. Putin's humiliation gives us an opening. His army cannot win in Ukraine. The West's powerful reaction put Russia's economy in freefall. Putin's legacy is in doubt. He's a thug. An old thug looking to make his life mean something. The best thing the West can offer Putin and Russia is respect. Let him save face and address his most pressing concerns. We want him to find significance inside the international system. His well-deserved Hague War Crimes Tribunal will have to wait, along with George W. Bush's. What would respect look like? The West can listen and respond to what Putin is saying. Ukraine can choose generosity. Putin fancies himself the protector for ethnic Russians. Like Hitler, he claims his attacks protect a vulnerable minority. The West can offer Putin a way to address Russia's concerns within the UN framework. Putin invoked the UN Charter to justify his attacks. The proper way under the Charter to protect a minority group is a UN peacekeeping force. The West can offer UN peacekeeping forces with Russian monitors for all disputed Ukrainian regions. In return, Russia would return all captured territory, including Crimea. Let the peacekeepers remain until all parties agree to remove them. They could stay for decades. The process could start today. The West could make a similar offer in Georgia. Ukraine can agree to allow the separatist regions to run their own internal affairs. In return, the regions disarm. Leave their final status to the people who live there. No rush. Ukraine can pass the Russian language law. Access to government services in Russian goes a long ways to debunk stories of mean Ukrainians beating up on ethnic Russians. Is this fair to the Ukrainians? No! Yet they showed immense compassion towards captured Russian conscripts early in the war. Zelensky has the political capital, and he speaks Russian. The law would also serve an important internal role. The Azov Battalion, actual blood-and-earth fascists, fights well and gains followers. Passing the Russian language law shows Ukrainians don't fight for an ethnic state. Putin becomes the defender of ethnic Russians. He also gets credit for isolating Ukraine's tiny fascist minority. Ukraine can give Sevastopol to Russia. It sheltered the Russian Navy for over 100 years. The U.S. Guantanamo Bay Naval Station is likewise U.S. territory on foreign soil. Putin gains Sevastopol for Russia forever. Ukraine can write armed neutrality into its constitution. Suitable Western guarantees and military support would make a repeat of the current fiasco unlikely. Ukraine's determination to defend itself makes one foolhardy. Putin can say Ukraine will never join NATO. The EU can agree not to impose a hard trade boundary between Ukraine and Russian bloc countries. Instead, the Ukrainian border with the EU becomes the hard border, something like Northern Ireland, if and when Ukraine joins. Putin can say Ukraine remains open to Russia. Of course, the hate from the war might take a generation or two to die down. Still, even a symbolic EU move shows respect. That covers Russia's issues with Ukraine. What about Russia's ongoing information war with us? The economic sanctions give the West something to offer once the shooting ends and Russian troops withdraw. The West can offer to loosen or lift sanctions in return for Putin shutting down his program and giving a full accounting of who did what. Who ran Brexit operations, records of all the messages sent and politicians bankrolled, the 2016 US elections, and so on. not to punish Russia or her operatives. Just to be clear, Russian operatives defended their country. They were soldiers on a battlefield. Blame the Westerners who helped. Very doubtful Putin is loyal to his Western accomplices. He may betray them if the price is right. The West outcompeted Russia again and again because of our values. A more just society enjoys a built-in advantage. People try harder and come up with more creative ideas. More authoritarian societies never catch up. The West's power comes from that well. The only way authoritarians beat us is if we turn our back on justice. We stand all too close to doing just that. Western oligarchs twist laws, exploit employees, and gouge consumers. Russian-funded far-right groups attempt to enshrine injustice. The leader's word, not the law. Crony capitalism, not competition. Power, not truth. Fascists from the US to Hungary rig voting systems. Russia is dying. She lost her 300-year race against Western values. How ironic if we let her destroy them on her way out. How tragic if the West fails to offer Russia a better path.